and welcome to my Impractical Thoughts. My name is Christopher, and here I talk about roller coasters, and today I'm going to talk about two roller coasters that are near to my heart. But first, before we do that, I want to let you know that you can find me also on Instagram at ImpracticallyChristopher, and for this video, if you wouldn't mind giving it a like and subscribing to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. So today, what we're going to do is talk about two coasters that are in my top 5 most ridden coasters of all time. And the one that I've ridden the most overall, and what I believe is the best coaster at my home park, Six Flags Over Georgia, is Goliath. It's a B&M Hyper, and 453 miles away, there's another B&M Hyper at SeaWorld Orlando, Mako. Now, I got a lot of my rides on Goliath and Mako in back-to-back weekends back in 2022, and I got over 20 rides on both Mako and Goliath on those weekends. In addition to that, Georgia Coaster Connection put on a Goliath marathon where we rode Goliath 31 times in one day. So I feel like at this point I've got a pretty good feel for both of these coasters. So let's do some quick background. Goliath debuted in 2006 at the very tail end of a period where Six Flags was still spending big bucks on coasters, and they were buying B&Ms and Intamins and things of that nature. Mako debuted exactly 10 years later at SeaWorld Orlando in 2016. Now, Goliath stands exactly 200 foot tall, but only features a 175-foot first drop, which causes some to criticize it as not a real hyper. Mako also stands exactly 200 feet tall, but sports an equally as long first drop. Now, Goliath features a 9-row train, while Mako's is only 7 rows long, and both are the standard 4-across trains. And you can get some pretty good whip over that first drop in the back row of Goliath thanks to its longer train, but the drop levels off quicker than Mako's. And even with a shorter train, you feel the drop even more on Mako thanks to its steeper angle, which I believe gives it the better first drop. Now, you can't have a drop without a lift, unless you're a time traveler. So let's talk about each coaster's lift. Mako's lift gives you a great view of Kraken to the left and features music on the lift hill speakers as you ascend. You also have what I call Lake B&M, a big body of water surrounding both Mako and Kraken. And other than that, the rest of the views that you see are basically of Orlando. I believe that Goliath has no answer for this admittedly aesthetic comparison. Now, you could say, well, you get a pretty good view of the park and the parking lot. You can see some of downtown Atlanta, which is true. But for me, I still think Mako gets the nod here for a little extra character, mainly for the lake setting and the music on the lift hill. So now let's talk about smoothness, because this can make or break a coaster. Now on Mako, for me, there's not a hint of roughness. Now granted, it's a lot younger than Goliath, but there are coasters that debuted on the rough side, mind blower, so I take nothing for granted. Now Goliath, it's a different story. Of all the B&M Hypers that I've been on, it is the roughest. And when the train hits those valleys, you can really feel the vibrations in a way that I've never felt on a B&M Hyper. And I felt that like in rows 1 and 9, those were the smoothest. Rows 5 through 8 were the roughest on the outside seats, while the inside seats are more tolerable. Now, I want to be clear, Goliath isn't so rough and shaky that it's unenjoyable, but if it starts to get a little bit worse, I do think it's going to become an issue. So now let's look at each coaster's layout. Mako sports a little over 4,700 feet of track and hits a top speed of 73 miles an hour. Goliath reaches almost 4,500 feet of track and hits a top speed of 70 miles an hour. Mako features 5 moments of airtime, with the first airtime hill after the drop serving as my favorite element on the ride. Mako's course rides along the lake that I mentioned earlier, situated near Kraken. And after the mid-course breaks, the ride really doesn't do a lot for me from an element perspective, even as it winds around the coaster's entrance. It's kind of like Candemonium in that the first half is very strong, but the second half just feels like filler. Goliath, on the other hand, features a whopping 9 moments of airtime. Now, not all are the same, and not one moment I believe is stronger than Mako's first airtime hill, but it's all quality. Goliath's course leaves the park and features an abundance of negative Gs, and some wild positives too with that downward helix. There isn't a set of mid-course brakes, and there's only one set of trim brakes which hit in the valley post-helix. That is a huge positive, pun slightly intended. Plus, Goliath is consistent in both halves of the ride, all the way up until you pop up into the final brakes, which provides that 9th moment of airtime. And the setting of Goliath is strong as the portion outside the park twists above and around the entrance plaza pond. When it comes to layout and setting, I think Goliath gets the edge in both categories. So here we go. With all that information, like I said, I feel like I got a pretty good feel for each one, and I'm ready to make my declaration and choose which coaster I'd give the edge to. But before I do, and please excuse my diplomacy, both coasters are phenomenal. I'm very lucky to have a B&M Hyper at my home park, and especially lucky to have one as good as Goliath. But putting my home park bias aside, I'm giving the edge to Mako, and here's why. Mako is smoother. I've ridden B&M Hypers that are 5 years older than Goliath, and they run very smooth, like Raging Bull, Nitro, and I just cannot chalk it up to Mako being the newer of the two. Those end seats on rows 5 through 8 on Goliath are just brutal, and there's not a bad seat on Mako that I've ever experienced. Additionally, that airtime hill after the first turnaround on Mako is insane. The speed hill before the mid-course brakes provides some great forces in my opinion as well, and the drop is miles better than Goliath. Now, you can't go wrong with either coaster, and both are going to be in my overall high rankings, but after riding both of them so much in a short span of time, I felt like it was a good time to compare the two. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Have you ridden both Goliath and Mako? Do you have a favorite between the two? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. And that's all we've got for today. Thank you for listening to some of my sometimes impractical thoughts. We'll talk to you later.